Hello everybody, welcome back to our Truncated Studios. This is Jordan, and in today's video I'm going to be talking about the weather over the next week. We have continued potential for some severe weather, although it does look less significant than what we've been seeing for the last few weeks. And we do have a potential of a couple tropical systems developing over the next week as well, along with the potential of possibly significant flash flooding across portions of the United States, and even more, which I will talk about. So let's get right into today's video. First, I'm going to be talking about the potential for some severe weather across much of the United States over the next few days. For today, we have a slight risk of severe weather across much of the northern plains, another one across parts of the Ohio Valley, and then another one across parts of the northeastern United States. Most of those areas do have a 2% tornado risk. I wouldn't be surprised to see a few tornadoes today, although the risk is relatively low. I think just a large area we could see a few tornadoes today, which would be weak if they do occur. And in our wind risk, we have 15% wind risk, not hatch wind risks, which means we shouldn't see any significant wind gusts today, although we could still see some scattered damaging wind gusts up to 70 miles an hour potentially today. And then our hail risk is relatively lower, except across parts of the northern Great Plains, where we have a 15% hatch risk of hail, which means we could see some hailstones potentially reaching baseball size or larger later today. So be prepared to take shelter from any hail that becomes very large or even giant hail. Having another 5% risk across much of the northeastern United States. For tomorrow, we have a small slight risk of severe weather across much of northeastern and east central Montana, and then a marginal risk across much of the mid-Atlantic and to parts of the Ohio Valley. Our tornado risk for tomorrow is pretty low, although we could still see an isolated tornado across parts of central South Dakota for tomorrow, and a small sliver of North Dakota is also in that risk. Then, here's our wind risk. 15% wind risk across parts of eastern Montana. And then our 5% wind risk is across parts of the mid-Atlantic and southern Ohio Valley. And we can see some scattered damaging wind goes around 60 to 70 miles an hour tomorrow. And then our hail risk, we have a small 15% hail risk across parts of central Montana, where you could see some hailstones possibly reaching up to golf ball size, around 1.75 inches in diameter for tomorrow, although we are not expecting to see anything significant for hail. Then, looking at our day 3 outlook, we have a large marginal risk of severe weather extending from the northern Great Plains through much of Minnesota into the western upper peninsula of Michigan. Then here's your probabilities, 5% in all those areas. We could see an upgrade to a slight risk in later outlooks, just based on the trends we've been seeing with previous outlooks of other days. Then looking at day 4 through 8, day 4 through 6 are all predictability too low, which means there is some confidence that severe weather will occur, but the timing or location is not very certain. And then the predictability too low beyond that, or potential too low beyond that, means that we're not confident in enough potential for severe weather to outline any areas quite yet. Now looking at the Weather Predictor Center outlooks, we have a small moderate risk of flash flooding across extreme northeastern Missouri and central Illinois. We have a slight risk of flash flooding surrounding that, extending across much of the Midwest and Ohio Valley, and then another slight risk extending from southeastern North Dakota into northeastern South Dakota. And then we obviously have a couple different marginal risks there. We could see some scattered significant flash flooding in that moderate risk area today. And even the slight risk, the marginal risk, we could see some isolated to scattered flash flooding with isolated significant flooding in some areas. So be prepared if a flash flood warning is issued for your area or a flash flood is ongoing. Then for a day 2 outlook, looks pretty much calmer, although we do have that slight risk across southern Indiana, much of Kentucky, northeastern Tennessee, western Virginia, and southwestern West Virginia, where we could see some scattered flash flooding in those areas tomorrow. And then the marginal risk, you have a chance of some isolated flash flooding, does not look too concerning in many areas for tomorrow, thankfully. Then our day 3 excessive rainfall outlook, we have a large slight risk of flash flooding across much of northern and central Minnesota into northwestern Wisconsin and the extreme northwestern upper peninsula of Michigan, where you could see some scattered flash flooding, and then we could see some isolated flash flooding in other areas, such as the southern mid-Atlantic and parts of the western Great Plains and parts of the Rocky Mountains. Now looking at the National Hurricane Center, you can see we have a 10% chance of a tropical cyclone forming in 7 days in the Atlantic and that area there. It's currently located far away from land, and the environmental conditions aren't that favorable for some development, but could develop gradually over the next day or two before it encounters unfavorable conditions for formation. So it does not look like that will form, and the Atlantic will be quiet. Then you have the Eastern Pacific, 20% chance of development. Not very favorable for development. It's marginally favorable. We could see some slow and gradual development of the system before it encounters unfavorable conditions in around 2 to 3 days from now. And the Central Pacific is as quiet as it's ever been. We don't expect anything to form there anytime soon, and it should be pretty quiet for a while now. Next, looking at the GTWC, there has been an earthquake somewhere. But we do have a couple areas of interest for typhoons. We just had Typhoon Whipple make landfall, and now it's a high-end tropical storm, which is bringing significant flooding and winds to parts of China. And then we have 97W has a low chance of formation in 24 hours. This could become our next named storm in the Western Pacific. Looking at the track of Whipple, right now is at 60 knots. It's expected to stay around 55 to 60 knots as it moves back over in the waters there. And I wouldn't be surprised if it briefly becomes a typhoon before making landfall in Vietnam before rapidly weakening as it moves inland, and at that point the main concern will be flash flooding. Now, here's a satellite imagery for Tropical Storm Whipple. You can see it looks decent on satellite, but it is over land right now. It will not continue to develop until it moves back over that water. Right now, it is holding its intensity because a lot of the storm is still over water, just not the center of the storm. So as long as part of the storm stays over water, it can still maintain its intensity for a decent amount of time. And there is also some water across parts near the center, which is likely keeping it from rapidly weakening over land. Now looking at the weather model, this will just show the United States. As you can see, right now we do have some scattered thunderstorms and rain across much of the northern and eastern parts of the country. But as we go forward in time, you can see we have the concern for flash rain across parts of the Ohio Valley, as we have storms just training over the area, according to the ECMWF. And then for tomorrow, or for Tuesday, I mean, if that does happen, which it shows on here, that could bring a decent threat of some severe weather. And then we have this area to watch down here, which could briefly become something tropical near the Gulf Coast of Florida and Louisiana, Alabama, and Mississippi, although it doesn't look too significant on this model. Now looking at the GFS, you can see the flooding occurring in parts of the Ohio Valley. Then we have that storm system on the 22nd, not as significant according to the GFS. But as we forward it, you can see a system from the Eastern Pacific, which, based on the pressure, I guess that's a high in Category 1 hurricane, maybe even a low in Category 2. That could just be the GFS. That's probably not going to actually happen. Now we have the CMC. You can see that flooding across parts of the Ohio Valley. Then that storm system on the 22nd and 23rd there, which looks better on this model. It's kind of between the Euro and the GFS. And then we have this sneaky little offshore non-tropical low, which could briefly develop into a tropical or subtropical storm. We'll have to keep an eye on that there for any development that will or could occur. Next, this is the nav gem. You can see that flooding across parts of the Ohio Valley there. And then you can see that storm system coming through. This one actually has it a little more significant than many of the other models. That could bring severe weather and flash flooding. And this doesn't really have anything in the tropics. It has a high pressure dominating much of the tropical development area around the United States, which would block anything from forming for at least a week or two. Now looking at the icon, there's that thing across the Ohio Valley, and that system that moves through, and we actually have this model showing a potential tropical system around 72 hours, and it goes across the Gulf there. Doesn't show a pressure or anything, but looks like around 2012 millibars, or 1012, excuse me, which that could potentially be a tropical system. Then it gets pulled up into it dissipates very quickly after landfall, which tells me that that would be weak, probably like a tropical storm. But I'll keep an eye on that for any future updates. And then the JMA isn't very helpful for this, but we can see the wind here. You can see not much happens other than parts of the Central Plains, which that could lead to some severe weather there looks like some decent wind shear. Anyways, that's all I have for today's video. If you haven't already, please subscribe to my YouTube channel and like the video, as it tells me that you guys like the videos that I'm making, and I will continue to put out more content like this, and soon I might start making more content like gaming videos if enough people subscribe to me. So anyways, that's all I have for today's video. The potential for some severe weather could continue over the next few days, and we could have a couple tropical systems in the Atlantic and Pacific over the next couple of weeks, and the potential for some flash flooding continues across parts of the Ohio Valley and plains. Good